Hi, welcome to the Lifestyle Herbalist, the podcast where holistic wellness meets everyday living. I'm your host, Dabney Vaccaro. I'm a registered dental hygienist, a clinical herbalist, and a certified health coach.
And I'm your co-host, Sabrina Cooper, a registered dental hygienist with a bachelor's in oral health promotion, a certified culinary nutritionist and herbalist, and a mindfulness and mindful eating coach. Together, we explore the intersection of holistic health, herbal wisdom, and joyful living. From plant-powered remedies to kitchen medicine, mindful moments, and conversations that feed the soul, we're here to help you feel vibrant, grounded, and inspired in your daily life. So steep a cup of something soothing, settle in, and let's grow well together one episode at a time, bringing you a healthy dose of happiness.
Hey, welcome back to the Lifestyle Herbalist. So today, Sabrina and I are here to talk to you about our gardens. We are living actually in opposite spectrums this year. I'm here in the Shenandoah Valley that's really been very moist and ample rains that have kept everything green and lush. However, Sabrina has had the opposite experience. Hey, Sabrina.
Hello. It's nice to see you again. We've been so busy doing our summer activities and trying to keep on top of everything. Um, Here in Ontario, I'm in the Kawartha Lakes area. We had a very dry summer. We probably had a total of maybe half a day of rain in 8 to 9 weeks total, which was a first for us. There was very little to no rain. And so as much as you would think, we all loved it because a lot of people, we're on lakes here, so we were able to enjoy the lakes a lot more. But some days it was just ridiculously hot and humid, and times we also had to face some of the fires that were happening. We got smoke from that. So there were a lot of issues that we were dealing not only with our plants, but ourselves. And so we managed to push through. And I thought it would be a great topic as we wind down this season because usually we say, oh, we have this and we want to show off our gardens. But it was about, for me, it was about trying to keep them alive. And I think for Dabney, it was about trying to keep the weeds at bay and keep everything afloat. So we
Yes.
thought we would talk about our challenges and our pluses and some of the maybe plants that um, are thriving in this type of weather and things that we saw that were not doing so good and what happens. I know I'm in a zone 4, if that means anything to anybody. That might help because I know, like, California, I think is a maybe higher zone than us. I think Dabney, you're
But
probably about the same.
I'm a 7.
7. Oh, okay. So
Mhm.
you're way different than us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, my
um,
garden, my sanctuary, everything's been vibrating with just life. And the comfrey leaves are the size of small blankets. The lemon balm has formed a fragrant, buzzing fortress. The echinacea has just gone crazy. Lim, um, my nettle has just really just gone crazy out there. I've cut it, I don't know how many times, and finally I said, okay, nettle, I think I have all I need for the next 2 seasons. It's like it's just been just wonderful. Um,
plants.
and it's a site that truly fills my heart. The abundance has just been a blessing. But man, it's been a jungle out there.
That's great. Well, that's for certain herbs for us. I mean, like some things like the drought tolerant plants that we usually have issues with, like we're doing really well. Like my rosemary was doing amazing this year. Usually it's kind of iffy because it's not that warm and so it doesn't thrive. My cacti, like my prickly pear, were like multiplying like crazy because they're not used to these warm, hot temperatures, which aren't really an edible plant. But I was really proud that like my little cactus area was getting going really great. Oregano also, and sage was another big one for us that sometimes can be iffy.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and the mullein was like crazy everywhere. Like every, I have this garden that I started, and I had seen this little plant, and I said, I think that's mullein. I'm just gonna let it be in its space because I was moving kind of things around, and it took off. And somebody came up to me and said, "Why are you growing weeds in your garden? That's so crazy." And I'm like, "Oh no!" I'm like, "Don't you know all about this?" And I would explain to them, and they're like, "Oh." And then I was working in my garden; they didn't see me, and I could hear them saying, yeah, she said that it wasn't a weed. And did you know that it was good for this and this and this? And so they were telling people, which I would thought it was hilarious because sometimes they don't thrive in this weather either for us, or you see them sporadically here and there. But the challenge was really interesting, and I found that some things were bolting because it was too hot. We couldn't let things like my cilantro or something like that was just not doing well, or cucumbers, for example, like they would be growing, but the leaves would start to change and not do, they weren't adapting. Like you would see the flowers start, but then the flowers would fall off because they just weren't getting that
They love
um,
water.
level of water that we could. And so it was a lot of watering, a lot of care, and I just thought, maybe I could mention some of the things like for yourself, like what do you do when there's too much rain and you can't control the amount of rain? It's not like you can add soil, dry soil to make it drier. Is there something that you do um, to protect some of your plants, or what do you do? Or how do you come back from so much rain?
Yeah, the same rains that have been a blessing also unleashed an army of weeds. And I had a really hard time keeping up with them because they had just overgrown so quickly. And because it was July, and normally it's dry and hot, but we just had the hot and we had the rain. And then it was muggy out there. It was wet. And a lot of times it would happen like it would rain in the evenings. And so I would work or I would be out during the day. And then typically, if you're going to cut flowers and things for drying or your herbs, you want them to be dry because if they're wet coming in, then sometimes they have even a higher tendency to mold, and then you'll lose your herbs, and that's not really what the idea is. So I just couldn't get out there for a period of time. But then around the end of July, we had a cool week that came in, and I was able to finally go out there with a bucket. And it was funny because I probably pulled out it was over a 5 gallon bucket. I don't know how big this bucket is, but it was bigger than a 5 gallon bucket. I think I took four of them to the field and dumped the weeds in. And I have like these little dirt lockers, which is like a raised bed, so it's not like I could get a tiller in there. So I had to weed by hand. And so I was able to reclaim a lot of my vegetables. It's like, oh yeah, I did plant that there. It's still here. Like, but they had, some of the leaves had turned yellow because they couldn't get the sunshine because of the weeds had overtaken them. So, and some of my beets didn't come up real well because the weeds had overtaken them. And so they were small. The weeds grew up. And so the beet leaves couldn't reach the sunshine. And so now they're doing great now that they can see the sunshine. There was plenty of water, but because the weeds had gotten so tall and so thick that they just couldn't get the sunshine.
I
So
couldn't get the
that
sunshine.
was that was a bit of a complication, just being able to get out there. And then some of my calendula, actually, I wasn't able to harvest them because it was so wet that
Oh,
they I wasn't able to get them because they were wet. And so anyway, it's been a bit of a struggle, a different spectrum than what I typically deal with here in the Shenandoah Valley. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, these high temperatures cause so much stress to like a lot of our plants that just things weren't growing at the rate they should have either. You would think like, hey, you got a lot of heat, you're gonna get like bigger yield of things. Like even our tomatoes, for example, we had a plethora of tomatoes, but they were a lot smaller in size than they would normally because they just didn't have what they needed. They had slower photosynthesis. They slow down when there's too much heat in their growth period, right? That and it's so they can't like breathe, let's say. They like their respiration, the photosynthesis, all that stuff slows down, and then you can't get them to produce because it's just they're in survival like fight or flight mode like us. Like if we go, all of a sudden we're always in fight or flight, we're not going to produce maybe as well as we would if we kind of take a step back and slow down. And it's sort of the same thing when there's too much that they're trying to do, they won't thrive. So basically, you know, people think watering is just a thing. Well, I can water anytime. I can water up high. I'll get my sprinklers out. People were doing that. When it comes to some of these plants, it's really important to understand that you have to water low and slow, basically get into the roots of the plants, but don't overwater them so that they don't have time. Especially when we first planted, it was like, okay, everybody, we had a big ice storm. And so people were trying to recover some of the trees and plants and bushes because a lot of people lost like blueberry bushes, raspberry, these kind of things. So they thought, oh, we'll plant in the spring so they'll thrive. But these plants didn't have enough time for their root ball to like spread, right? So that was like a bit of an issue for a lot of people were losing their plants and then watering. A lot of people are on well water. They're drawing from the lake sometimes, it just wasn't enough water. So people were starting to choose if they should take from the well, otherwise they're not going to have water,
Mhm.
or do they take and water their plants? So that was a really sad. So what I did, I was lucky. I had city water, which bills were not, great to say the least. I gave up the grass. I didn't worry about my grass. I let the clover take over in that case, and actually it thrived. It looked like I had green grass because I had a lot of clover. So it just goes to show you how resilient clover and dandelion leaves are
Great.
because
And they don't grow real tall,
and they
which is
didn't
the
grow
other part.
tall. They because they were in the off season of their, so they that did well. On the side of the road, it's funny because you see all dead grass and you would just see like the chicory or like these other like just
Mm,
the weeds, right,
yes,
sticking out.
yes,
So it
yes.
was kind of funny to see that so I was like, oh, that's really not a weed because some of them are medicinal. And I thought, just goes to show you, right? Like how resilient they are and what they can do for us. So basically, the point of watering, when it got off topic, is that we really want it to penetrate the earth. So even somebody would be like, yeah, we got rain. It just wasn't enough. Like it would be like a 0.5 inch of rain, which just sprinkled and didn't get deep. So you'd have to put your finger, just make sure, is there enough? Nope. So you would have to water because, and I watered in the morning because if you water in the morning, it's the water is you'll lose water evaporation, right? So in the cooler, last chance of it losing the to evaporation in the cooler temperatures. So it allows the plant to fully hydrate during the day because if you water at night, that plant will not allow sometimes that water to evaporate and it could cause root rot or it could cause mold or mildew to some of your plants, especially if you're watering high and not watering low. So that's a really important thing that I wanted to know to people because I noticed people be like, my plants are dying. Well, how are you watering? Were you watering deep? Were you not watering deep? Or were you just giving them a sprinkle? Or were you watering too hard that
Mm.
it would kind of run off and not get to the roots? So it's always low and slow. I just wanted to kind of say that about the watering. Um, yeah,
Yeah. There's just nothing better though than rainwater.
rainwater, of course.
There's so many nutrients, and my plants just my potted plants, like my hanging baskets, like I can water them every day and they look okay. But man, when you get that rain from the sky, like they just perk up and you almost see the petals smile. Like they are
Oh,
so
yeah,
happy. And I
100%.
guess it's just the nutrient difference. I guess there's a different nutrient profile. Maybe of course, I have, from the ground, I have hard water here. So I guess there's just more minerals maybe that the plant doesn't love. I don't really know, but I just know that when it falls from the sky, my plants are just so happy.
Everything looks a lot greener. I mean, even if you tried to like save some of the grass in some of the areas, I mean, that's important to some of the people. Of course, you could tell the ones that had an irrigation system because they were constantly watering every day. But even if you did like a spot water, the grass, like now we're getting some rain, you can tell that they're getting more nutrients from the rainwater that's coming, even if it's just a sprinkle or the dew that comes up during the day, like at night, overnight, than you do if you were to put on this, like the sprinkler really doesn't just didn't give it that nutrient that they needed, and then a lot of people here like to fertilize with compost or they're like give them natural fertilizer to get the plants going. And really, it's doing the opposite when it's hot. You can't let something try and grow when it's already struggling. It's not going to take it in that way. It's not. So, like you said, the rainwater is really important for us and the growth. Like corn, for example, I was talking to a local farmer, and he said, "Yeah, the plants are sort of growing, but the fruit is not growing." So
Hmm.
what is that going to mean for us in the winter or for the feed, right? A lot of it's feed for the animals
Right.
locally. How
Right.
is that going to affect the meat coming through, like chickens and all that kind of thing? We'll have to wait and see. But they said it could be a very expensive winter for
Oh,
food.
wow.
Yeah. So, it comes with its pros and cons. I mean, it's interesting when you're not really like farming. I mean, I'm grateful that I can survive, go to grocery store and I'm not, but I feel bad for these farmers that, they have to pay their land and they have to produce a crop and, all that stuff. And if they don't have the rain to grow these crops, it gives you a greater appreciation of the struggles that they face. Because we haven't faced this drought like this in a very long, long time. So, our lakes are even like not as full as they usually are. The water levels are low. So
Hmm.
let's hope for a wet, snowy winter so that we can replenish our lakes,
Yeah, for real. I
you
mean,
know?
we all need water. It's
Yeah.
very important to life.
Yeah. And so, what were some of, oh, well, you mentioned kind of some of the plants, but what were some of the other plants that thrived in your wet
Oh
environment?
gosh. My lemon balm went really crazy, and my thyme, my
Time, yeah.
oregano, rosemary has done really well. You know, those things that have such volatile essential oils. Um, my
And they
hyssop
say
did,
like,
my
oh,
hyssop did okay. It didn't do great, but it did okay. Um, but yeah, my cucumbers were happy. They're not necessarily medicinal, but it is a plant that I planted. My
just plants in
tomatoes
general.
My tomatoes took a long time to ripen. My cherry tomatoes are like going nuts. I've picked so many cherry tomatoes. I've given so many cherry tomatoes away that I think people now look at me and thinking, "Oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't have any more cherry tomatoes." But um, my big slicing ones, like I had lots of green tomatoes for like a long time. And I just picked my very first one last week. And I thought, the snow's going to fly before these guys ever turn before I can ever pick them. But now they're finally starting to emerge. But I think it's because it was so wet. When tomatoes are a
Yeah.
little, they're
Finicky.
persnickety. Yeah,
Yep, they
they're
are.
really particular about their environment and what they like. And they don't like wet feet. They like things to be hot and dry, especially those hot, dry nights. And I think with all the rain, and I talked to other folks who are having similar situations that lots of green tomatoes waiting for that first one to pick. But now they're coming. But we've kind of dried up a bit. We're not having as much rain. So things are drying up just a bit, enough that like I said, I could get out there and reclaim my garden space. The flowers have been great, though. The growing of the flowers have been beautiful. There's such a small window of time that you can pick medicinal flowers, because you have to wait until they dry after the morning dew. But then if you get a downpour or a rainy day, that you can't pick them. So anyway, that being said, like my zinnias and my Mexican sunflowers and my cosmos, they all have been just beautiful. And it's just a beautiful sight out there by the garden.
That's why I love spring here because everything looks so beautiful with the rain, and then we get on and off rain, and temperatures are probably more what they like than this summer that we have often here in Ontario. It can be a little bit hard to grow certain flowers and certain things, and especially up here north, we're more about the native plants, right, of the area to keep everything and the pollinators. I can tell you that I had a lot of bumblebees and bees and hummingbirds, so
Great.
and monarchs. I was all excited. So, I will say that the pollinator garden that I am creating is doing its job, which is really nice to see when you're sitting outside and you hear like buzzing and you're not, and they're just minding their business. Nobody's like coming to attend. No, even the wasps, okay, they're allowed to live too, but it's really nice that everybody intermingles. I don't know. It's a weird, I don't know. Is that just an
Their
herbalist thing? I don't
ecosystem.
know. But it's fun, and I think, people spray the pesticides and things like that on their grass, and this year nobody really needed to because there was nothing growing, so that was good. Um, but it's nice to see all the plant life that does thrive in these temperatures and was allowing the source of food and pollination for the insects and
Mhm.
bees, and right, like that to me was something that was special here. Yeah.
Yeah. My motherwort did really well. I got several cuttings from my motherwort, and my chamomile did really, really well. Of course, it
Mm.
has a season and that it just kind of dies off, but
And it looks
I
kind of
had a lot
floppy
of
and
little flowers from those guys. But it was before the rains, like the really big rains started coming, they were already done. But the other side of that was, while I love having that rain and all that comes with the rain,
mm,
having too much rain is, it's a
not good.
breeding ground for trouble, because, we end up with some mildew and fungal diseases that really love that, that wet soil and then the leaves. And, it can destroy some plants, especially with some things like root rot and things like that. So, you have to inspect the leaves for spots. You have to look for the blights, just a few days of dampness can undo months of growth. So, it's just, no one can mess with Mother Nature. It is what it is.
And nowadays, we just never know. Everybody says that climate's changing. Of course, but is it just also part of the cycle? Sometimes we do have like, this kind of weather. Sometimes it's like longer. Th- I do think the seasons are changing a little bit. I mean, we used to be okay, Labor Day to plant. This year, we went well into June for planting. So, that was different for us because then we were like, what's going to happen? Like, our tomatoes going to come out like, late, but they're still coming and they're still doing well. And zucchinis and all that didn't seem to be, I know we're talking more about medicinal plants, but again, that was doing really well. And so, I mean, I did cut back some of my things like the oregano and the chives and the mint, that kind of thing really did come back and did really well. What didn't do well? There was something out there, and I was like, "Oh, this doesn't look so good." But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, sorry,
Oh, I was gonna say, um, my passion flower
lavender didn't
really
do good.
went to a slow start, but now there is so much passion flower out there. I keep collecting that
Oh,
to
nice.
try, and I made a tincture and things like that. But it got off to a slow start, but it's been very happy with the weather conditions. Yeah.
I will also say like soil is a very big thing. Like I had raised beds in this one garden that I was starting. I started it with organic soil from a local farmer, compost. Thrive. You should see like they took off. It was like beautiful or everything's doing great. I had like like pollinator plants along with the like different medicinal herbs along with just some fun edible flowers and things like that for this garden. And then we put things into the ground just because I had them and I had to get them going. And things just did not like that soil. So it's really important. That's another really important thing. Even though it was dry and I was watering, I don't know if they were just weren't getting, it just did not go. Too dry, not the right soil, too much sun. Um, Things were like really tiny, like maybe an inch, and then they maybe grew to like 5 inches, and that's it. But some of them didn't even flower, which was really sad. Like the yarrow, which is usually like a weed,
Yeah, yeah.
did
No.
not tolerate it very well. Even lavender wasn't really great, which I was shocked. So we've decided that we're going to pull everything. That's another big job in the next few weeks. We're going to be We made some raised beds and we're going to put everything in raised beds because we figured that the soil just isn't the right condition for it. And I had some arnica in there and some other things, but
Wow.
even bee balm,
Yeah.
which usually grows crazy, did not do well. So it was really different, definitely challenging for some, definitely not as challenging for others. But overall, I think, if you really manage your gardens well and pay attention to the things that they need, especially if you're in full sun all the time with no reprieve, they're not, if you're able to create some shade, like some of them I had put in pots and I brought them closer to shade, like during the day, um, or putting a little shade blanket over them for a little bit of time to protect them, if I can. I mean, Dabney, you have a lot more acreage. You probably can't shade a lot of your plants, but we don't have a lot of trees in this area. A lot of them came down. So we were really trying to do our best and mulching and putting some natural mulch down just to keep the ground wet when we did water. But then again, like you said, you don't want to have them grow mold or get rotted or anything like that. So definitely, it's like kind of a fun, it keeps you busy, um, occupies your whole summer. Like I was just saying to Dabney before we got on this call, I said I was like just ready now, like to be like, oh, I can enjoy summer. And summer's basically almost over. So, but still harvesting and still doing. And I hope that everybody out there had a decent yield and crop of things that they grew. And
Yeah, I think for me, it's about adaptation and just acceptance. And I know I've had to change my schedule, seizing like a quick 2 hour window. And it's like gold, like, okay, I gotta go now. Like
yeah,
there's rain coming. I can hear the thunder in that distance. So I have my basket and my scissors close by that I can just grab and go at a moment's notice. Um, and I've had to practice triage, and I know I won't win every battle, but I have to focus on liberating the most precious plants and letting go of the corners of the garden to the wilderness.
Well, and they'll come back next year, and then maybe that they were just not meant to be harvested this year, and
Yeah,
next year you'll have an abundance, and whatever was in abundance this year, you won't have to harvest next year. Or maybe their crop won't be as plentiful next year, and you'll be like, oh, thank goodness I had such a good, crop this
great.
year.
I have enough to
Um,
get me through for a little while.
for a little while. And so
Yeah,
that's kind of the nice thing about it. And, I often feel like just as I'm ready to do something, I'll be like, oh, it's almost starting. Like you'll see a flower's starting to come, and you're like, should I still do it anyway? Do I harvest it and I'll just use it for something else? And so sometimes I just do that. Um, or it's like I'm gonna get to it, and then that's the day that we had like a little sprinkle. I'm like,
yeah,
no, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of that way, or you're like, oh, I know I have to do this lemon balm, and then it's already like seeding. Okay, well,
You know,
next year. So,
and I still laugh and I think I tell people, well, gardening is very similar to dental hygiene. And they look at me funny and I say, how? It's like, well, when I was carrying off all of those weeds, I said, I'm doing a growth debridement. And for anyone who doesn't understand that language, if you're a dental hygienist or a dental person, you understand that a growth debridement is something a hygienist does when somebody has lots of hard calculus on their teeth, so much so that the teeth are pretty much covered. And so we use our ultrasonics and our hand scales and we go in there and just debride the teeth. So we call that a gross debridement because we're just trying to uncover the teeth. And that's kind of what I did on that week in July with my garden is I did a gross debridement. And then we go back and we do what we call a fine scale. And that's when we go in with our hand instruments and our ultrasonics again and just meticulously clean out the rest of the calculus or the tartar that's been built up around the teeth and gums to try and build health. So gardening is so much like dentistry. It's amazing. And you see the result and it just makes you stand back and say, yeah, I did something there. It just looks so much better. Because rain is a force in nature and it doesn't cater to my plans. It
no.
does provide incredible, overwhelming abundance, but only on its own terms.
Well, and it is much, and it's like also, don't you find it's like people, like your gardens are like dealing with people because there's those ones that you don't really need to keep around and you can weed them out, and then there's those ones that you want around you because they just make you feel good. That's kind of how I find the garden. I'm like, there's ones that are just like they're good, but like you gotta go, and then
Mhm.
there's those ones that are just really, really like you're like, oh, I really need that, or I think we talked about this before in one podcast, but sometimes you'll pass by your garden and you're like just walk by or accidentally touch something and you get that really bold fragrance of one of the herbs or flowers or and I'm like I feel like that's when I need that specific
Mm.
plant in my world. Like
Yeah.
it's something telling me like you need this, and then I'm like I stop and I actually like take it in because I'm like it's just so it didn't happen yesterday or the day before, and so I'm like maybe there's a reason why I just accidentally brushed it, or as I was watering like a fragrance came up like lavender, or it could have been the basil or something, and it's just something, and then it uplifts you. It makes my spirit a little bit brighter, in that moment. So yeah, so I find you have to go with it. Go with the struggles may not. There's a silver lining to it always. And
Do you grow purslane there?
I did grow purslane and then it kind of overtook my garden, so I did
Yeah.
not grow it
Yeah,
anymore.
during those beginning wet times, I went out to
Yeah.
the garden. I was like, every single space is green. But it was green with purslane. Like it was
It's
literally
beautiful. It's just,
everywhere. It's so nutritious.
oh,
Like
it's great. But
it's the only green plant that has omega 3s. Like it has the highest amount
yeah,
of omega 3s than any other green plant out there. It is so nutritious. But oh my gosh. And it does taste good. Like I was just picking some off and eating it and it is quite delicious, but oh my gosh, there was so much purslane.
that and borage. This year borage just took
Oh
off
yeah, yeah.
crazy because it was like
I had to. I
That's
had to consolidate my Borago. It took over last year, and I thought, okay, Borago, you're going to have to stay in your lane this year. So I really made it kind of stay in its lane this year. So it was a much better gardening experience in that way. But yeah, it was it was quite a summer of growing. Of course, it's not over yet, but in reflecting, it was a lot to keep up with all the weeding. But the frustration of waiting for a dry day is the trade-off for not having to water. So, there's that. I didn't have to water.
You're lucky. It's like today, like it was like, I don't know, the other day we got our first day of not watering, and I was like, what are we gonna do with ourselves today? We get
Got
like this
two
whole
solid
morning and like
hours.
2 hours to like do something else. And then it was like, well, we might as well focus on inside because that got a little neglected, you know? So um you just pivot and you pivot pretty quickly, but you do find something to fill that 2 hours pretty quickly, right? So,
Oh yeah, it doesn't take but
um,
a minute.
doesn't take much. So yeah, so another rainy day today here, so that's kind of nice, and yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to what the fall will bring.
Oh, for sure. Who knows? It's hurricane season, and sometimes we
Oh,
get extra rain because of hurricanes and tropical storms. So it'll be interesting to see what Mother Nature has in store for us. But anyway, any of our listeners, let us know how your summer went. Were you on one end of the spectrum or the other? Were you somewhere in the middle? Type us a comment. Let us know how your growing season went.